U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia has died at the age of 79. He was found dead at his home in Texas. Scalia was one of the court's most conservative members. His death could shift the balance of power in the court, allowing President Barack Obama to add a fifth liberal justice. Scalia was nominated in 1986 by President Ronald Reagan. John Hendren is live for us now in Washington, D.C. John, certainly a very contentious figure, Justice Scalia. What will his legacy be? He was someone who really dominated that court, didn't he?
He was the most conservative justice on that court consistently. It's hard to find an issue on which he and someone like President Obama would agree. He believed in the death penalty. He believed that gay rights were not enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. He believed in the right to bear arms, and he also believed that the Constitution was not a living document. In other words, as things like women's rights and gay rights evolved and became generally accepted, he believed that those were not enshrined in the Constitution and that they shouldn't change with social mores. So he was a very conservative justice, very influential. Clarence Thomas, another justice, often voted with him, and he was often on the winning side of 5-4 decisions in this 9-member court that interprets the U.S. Constitution. This gives President Obama, of course, an enormous opportunity to appoint someone, but of course he's facing a Republican Congress, and that is going to be difficult. Nevertheless, Scalia is likely to be remembered as one of the most contentious and one of the brightest and most influential conservative justices in U.S. history.
Yeah, and if we talk a little bit more, John, about what happens next here. As you say, the president has this opportunity to appoint a justice that he wants on that court. But this is, as you say, a very contentious political season right now, an election year. How difficult will that be?
Well, it's going to be a huge battle because whoever gets to appoint this next Supreme Court justice will be able to tip the scales potentially from a 5-4 conservative majority to a 5-4 liberal majority. And President Obama, of course, is going to want to do that. However, the way the U.S. Constitution is written, the Senate has to approve it. The Senate is now controlled by Republicans. One thing they could do is continually reject Obama's nominees and put it off until the next president comes in. In their eyes, they would hope a conservative president. And just to give you an idea of how important this position is, the 2000 election was decided in the case of Bush versus Gore in favor of George W. Bush by the U.S. Supreme Court, and among the 5 members who voted in favor of declaring President George W. Bush as president was Antonin Scalia.
All right, for the moment, John Hendren live for us there in Washington. Thank you. Now, Justice Scalia's sharply worded opinions have, as we've been saying, influenced a generation of conservative Republicans, and some of his worldview is expected to be reflected in the latest presidential debate ahead of the primary contest in South Carolina next week. Donald Trump and Ted Cruz are the main contenders in what's considered a conservative state. Let's go to Alan Fisher now, who is live for us in Greenville, South Carolina. Alan, what should we be looking out for in this debate?
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Well, the death of Antonin Scalia is the buzz of the debate hall. That's everyone is talking about it, and certainly we can expect a couple of questions on the topic very early on in the debate. Now, Ted Cruz has been one of those who's been talking about the power of the Supreme Court. He was very angry when the decision was made over the Affordable Care Act 2 years ago. Obamacare, as it's come to be known, and said that it could go forward. And then on same-sex marriage, he accused the court of being activists rather than judges. Now, he's already tweeted out that he's sad to hear of the death of the justice, but he would like to see the next president of the United States be the one that appoints someone to the Supreme Court. And of course, he is the man who believes he's going to win the nomination and then the election and would have that power. But we're still 10 months away from an election. There's a long way to go and a confirmation process to go through. So the power of the nomination might not be in the hands of the next president. It might be something that Barack Obama can actually push through, as John Hendren was saying, a Republican Congress.
And so what sort of an impact do these debates have on the primaries and on the overall polls?
Well, just ask Marco Rubio. A week ago, he was coming off a very good result in Iowa. He was in third place there and doing well in the polls in New Hampshire. And in the space of 90 seconds, he had a terrible night in the debate in New Hampshire exactly 1 week ago. Chris Christie essentially dismantled the way he answered questions, said he was robotic, saying he was constantly using lines that had been tested by his advisors and he couldn't think on his feet. And Marco Rubio responded by repeating the exact same line twice. And so his poll numbers went down immediately after the New Hampshire debate, and he struggled in the final voting in New Hampshire as well. A look at Ben Carson. He was doing terribly well in the polls, and then he was exposed for his lack of experience on foreign policy and whether or not his economic policy actually made sense. So these debates shift polls, and when they shift polls, they shift votes as well. These debates can be remembered for one unforgettable moment which can sink a campaign. That has happened all through this process. And so this is a very interesting debate. It's number 8, I believe. We've been going for a very long time, since August of last year. They move polls, they move voters, they are important, and it's going to be significant now. We're down to just 6 candidates who performs well in the next couple of hours.
Alan Fisher live in Greenville, South Carolina, the scene of that next Republican debate. Thank you.